Hey everybody, I couldn't stay away. The audio might be a little different because I'm not on the AirPods because the battery died. But I took some time to eat, have some tea, check the news, saw some stuff that I will never be able to unsee. Uh, Hell of a time. We're living through history. Not the kind of history you want to live through, but it is definitely the kind of history you want to survive. So I'm rather than basically doom watch things that I have no control over. I am just going to keep making Kefi. I've got my little tins here to put stickers on. I've washed my hands up. Um, it's stuff I never thought to see in, well, it's not stuff that one expects to turn the news on and see. There's some stuff going on, and if you haven't checked the news, if you're not in the United States, you know what? Thank your lucky stars and get on with your day and just do something nice for yourself because we're in a very unusual time. It's a little frustrating, but what you gonna do? Where did I put my tea? There it is. Okay. Oh, so hang out with me and my batches of Kefi and the culmination of magic that I've been working on since Samhain of 2020 for Phoenix to rise out of the ashes with rebirth and renewal and renewed vigor to change and to grow and to transform everything. The website, if you have been trying to buy it, because so Squarespace, which is what we do the website through, does this thing with the little shop where when you make something live, like you have to like make up a certain number for it, so you have to tell them how much is in stock. And we never really think to put like 100 in there. Like it's hard to go back and fix it. So when we made this Kefi go live this morning, I think we only listed like 20. It should, if it isn't fixed already, it should be updated in the next little bit. Illyria is back from their run. It's interesting, like they were away from all of the news stuff. They got back to their car, sat down, and had like this like dizzy, weird like wave of stuff. Um, a roommate who works was at work and was just like, I don't know why I was having a panic attack. So we're all connected, and I can feel that like there's like a tightness, like I'm reacting to it too. There's a lot of unknowns, which way things are going to go, and it's just hard to watch and know what kind of suffering inevitably comes from this. So I'm going to try to avoid talking about what's going on out in the world because what I want to do is create a space and hold a space here where we can talk about magic, where we can talk about intention, where we can just hang out, where we can step back away from the things that we can't control in this moment, where we can do what wise warriors do, which is when there is a battle that you can't win or a battle that is too far away for you to fight, you spend time building up your resources, building yourself up, preparing yourself, being in a good, firm, stable place so that you can handle whatever comes. I mean, we'll survive because that's just how it works. But so up here, it smells like benzoin and cinnamon and like all the underlying bits of the Kefi. I will have to be rolling some more of the lunar eclipse in a minute, but I try to like I only roll them individually. Then I go like wash my hands and clean them with olive oil to get the smells and the stuff off. Because this one is dusted with benzoin and cinnamon. That one is dusted with dragon's blood, and there's a lot of intention and different associations that go with each of those. So I don't want to mix the magic, so to speak. It's very very relaxing and very very refreshing. Bleh. I'm took a moment, had a little food, got some tea. It's almost gone. It's still warm. Uh, okay, Roger has a good question. Would I explain the types that I have available? So there is silver mirror. So Kefi itself, by itself, just this the straight up recipe of Kefi was made in the ancient temples and burned during the dark hours. So at night, they would burn in the morning, at noon, and at night. And Kefi was burned to open wide the gates of dream and to facilitate visions and spirit communication, to simultaneously make the mortal people smelling it more attuned to and able to perceive that other spirit realm, but also to invite the spirits and the deities to feed them, to entice them to come and interact and communicate. So it was simultaneously an offering and a sacrament, a magical act. Kefi was additionally used as a medicine, as a breath freshener, as something that you use to keep your clothes smelling fresh. So it did multiple purposes. So Kefi in its base is about, in language that we understand, opening your third eye and facilitating communication with the other side. To that effect, Silver Mirror is aimed, and the intent woven into that is for spirit communication, for opening your senses, for helping to focus and attune your psychic abilities. And then we've got lunar eclipse, which is a slightly different recipe and built to echo and embody a significant part of ancient Egyptian mythology, where they believed like there were 12 hours in day and 12 hours at night. And after dusk, the sun would descend into the underworld for a journey of 12 hours. And in the bark, the boat of Ra, the sun god would travel this perilous journey, this underground river. So, like the underground echo of the Nile. And there were all kinds of monsters and demons and other beings that would threaten to devour and consume and destroy the sun during this underworld journey. The chief among them being Apep, a being that we probably know better through the Greek term Apophis. Now, Apep or Apophis became associated with Typhon, and all of them became associated with the god Set, who has come down to us now as this god of chaos and destruction, and as a big bad guy who's sometimes equated with Satan, who has a very, very complicated legacy. But in the earlier stories, Set, great of strength, was the god who stood at the prow of this boat with a spear of meteoric iron. And Set was the only of the gods who was strong enough to overcome the serpent Apep, to keep the sun safe during this deep, dark, perilous underworld journey. How Set became equated with this primordial, chaotic being that he was actually tapped to overcome is a curiosity of mythology and the way stories change and evolve and sometimes get politicized over time. But there's a lot of Setian influence in my lunar eclipse Kefi, and the idea is protection during the dark hours. So it's dusted in dragon's blood, partly because of the associations with dragon's blood as a protective and very solar scent, but also because red was one of the colors associated with Set. And I lean very much toward the very old interpretation of Set as the deity who is great of strength, who is not the uncle, but the twin of Horus, who represents an equal and opposite dynamic force in the universe. So lunar eclipse is for protection, and particularly for protection during the dark hours. I started making that one um, at the height of the protests and everything that was going on in the middle of the summer, where like the flashpoints started to like really show up, where it became obvious from a historical and a cultural perspective, not only just a psychic perspective, that a lot of change was on the air, and that where we were going as a people and especially as a country, we were moving into a space where we needed more protection, where those of us who were sensitive would need something to help shore up our boundaries and to help keep us safe during those dark nights of the soul. So that would be lunar eclipse, Kefi. And then on October 31st, I began this batch. It was a night of a blue moon. I started at 11:33 p.m. Eastern Standard. And this one is called Phoenix. Uh, what you might not know is I started, and I'm the founder of a group called House Keperu. And House Keperu started back in like 1995, or sorry, 96. And one of the rituals that we celebrate on our eightfold wheel of the year is on Samhain, but we do things a little differently from what you might be familiar with if you are acquainted with like the Wiccan or pagan wheel of the year. So for us, and this is totally arbitrary. Like these are just things that like I made it up. This is my thing. For me, Samhain was always about transformation, becoming. And part of that is also informed by our culture here, with Halloween being that time where you wear masks. And if you were a kid like me, you wore a mask on Halloween that was really honestly the face that you weren't allowed to wear any of the rest of the year. Like it was more genuinely you than what you were sort of forced to be through the rest of the year. And that got woven into the ritual that we call Imkeperu. Keperu is an ancient Egyptian word to transform, to change, to become. It's from one of their creation stories. And so that ritual and the significance it has with Phoenix as an incense is about transformation and change and a little bit of death and rebirth. And the story of the phoenix or the Benu bird, which is again something that goes back to Greek and Hellenic Egyptian times, was the phoenix was this migratory bird that would return every 500 years and gather branches of cinnamon and other rare exotic scented woods like frankincense and myrrh and create a nest, which really was a funeral pyre. And so it would burn itself on this pyre and then rise again reborn from the ashes until it went and came back and completed the cycle every other 500 years. The idea with that and the timing for that, ritually significant to me, astrologically significant with the blue moon and all of the conjunctions that were to come, and also culturally significant because in the US, we were just starting to like really count down to the elections. And Kefi is something that you make over the course of 10 to 15 days, depending on the ingredients, and then you let it cure for as long as 6 months. 3 months usually is long enough. And I made this one with a slightly altered proportion of resin to fruit, with the intention of it coming and being cured now, and at the latest a certain inauguration day in January, a swearing in day. So all of that is woven into it, and the idea is rising from destruction, rising from ashes, finding rebirth, finding renewal, even through all of the hard things that we've survived. And it was something that I'd intended on going live today specifically. And as events moved forward, like I really wanted to bring that energy to like all of the rest of this month from this day forward. And so we've got opening your psychic abilities with Silver Mirror. We've got protection during the dark hours with lunar eclipse, and we've got rejuvenation, rebirth, surviving the worst with Phoenix. So those are the three that are out. I haven't started a new batch. The very original batch that I made in 2019, I have some left, but I keep it for House Kepper. There's a little bit that I found over at Inspiration House that I had set aside for some work with the Travel Channel. And I'm debating rolling that up and making it available, but I'm not quite sure yet. And I haven't decided like what is going to be the magical work of the next batch, like what needs to be worked into it. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll start something in February. Best to protect the empathic child being on the spectrum who absorbs everything. More than just, well, I would say the lunar eclipse, definitely, if you want to use scent. And in that case, so this is an incense that has, first of all, you don't burn it so much as you almost treat it like a wax melt that needs to be released at a much higher temperature. But it's something that has such a rich scent that you can have little pieces of it that you keep, like, in, if you've got a box with your ritual tools, you put one or two pieces in there and it just infuses everything with the scent, in the same way that the ancient Egyptians would use it and put it basically in a wardrobe. You put it in there and your clothes will take on the sweetness and the subtlety of the incense with just a few pieces hanging out there. So you can, it has multiple applications. With your son, rather than just burning it around him, which frankly will get expensive. This is made with some very rare ingredients. It is incredibly time consuming. It's all handmade and all hand done. Having just a few pieces to just have the scent around in something, or like a sachet that you put like around a teddy bear's neck or something. But more than that, for a child who's super sensitive, especially a child who's on the spectrum, and thus has a very difficult time holding their own boundaries, I would recommend working with them and having some object, something tactile that they can relate to, that they are involved in, both creating and relating to as a protective charm or item. I mentioned a teddy bear. It doesn't have to be a teddy bear. Like, if they are somebody who like really likes to swaddle with a blanket, I would work something into a blanket, and engage them in making it. This is your comfort thing. Like, this is your armor, and working the energy and the protections into that, even to the point of like scribing, like with a silver sharpie or something, like little sigils and runes, or his own particular language written of protection on like the um, uh, I have blanked on the name of the thing that edges the blanket. You probably know what I'm talking about, but something that's physical and tactile that helps them focus. This is something that everybody can use as well, because sometimes when you are immersed, when you are overwhelmed, when it's a tsunami of perception and sensation that has just swept you away, it is incredibly difficult to marshal your focus and simply will yourself to be protected. But if you have something that is familiar, that has become habit, that you know, if you touch this, if you hold this, if you can ground yourself with the physical action with it, it helps to pull you back to yourself. It helps you pull you back to a point where you have a little bit more control. And that echo, that habit, makes it something that's easy to slip into. I am safe with this. So I'd say work with something that appeals to them pretty strongly. So I'm like here, like kind of doing the horse stance, because if I stand up all the way, my head's cut off. But let me, no, my thing is about as high as it's gonna get. The trick is like trying to get it so it can see the Kefi, and also trying to get it so it can see me. Yeah, let's see. From Trish, I've been trying not to watch all the chaos in the news, but can't help but watch it. And it makes me feel really angry and sad all at the same time. Boy, howdy. I want to meditate and get rid of the feelings of anger. What essential oils or crystals do you recommend? I'm not really, okay, so crystals are not in my wheelhouse. I don't relate to them very well. I Knowing like just common wisdom about them, I think black tourmaline is something that most people would recommend. Hematite is another one that people find very grounding, or hematite, however you want to pronounce that. Oils, calming scents. Keeping in mind, just in case, like know what you're allergic to, like know what you react to, and just because it works, if you're allergic to it, it's not, rule it out. Chamomile is always a good go-to. It's always a good relaxing go-to. A chamomile and lavender mix can be very, very calming and focusing. Trying to think of what like things that I personally use. I like warmer, grounding, earthy scents, at least for me. So what I would also say is sometimes conventional wisdom is uh, built of the average, like what appeals to everybody, what works for the majority of people. And if where we're at has taught us anything, we're not all the same in what speaks to us and how things work with us. So the other thing I would say is, are there particular scents that you find very grounding, that you find very calming, something that you associate with a good time in your life, something that you associate with home? It doesn't have to be a traditionally magic scent to have a profound impact and to help you focus and marshal your faculties. So, say it's baking chocolate chip cookies with your grandmother, and that helps you get out of the spiral and helps you really focus on what's important to you and things that are meaningful, and allows you to remember why you don't want to be this angry, or at least why you want to hone the anger and direct it constructively rather than simply stewing in it. Go with something that appeals to you. Yeah, lavender, hematite, obsidian. A lot of folks like uh, try to think of a couple of things. It's been a long day, so if I do like some nominal aphasia and stuff, I'm about as stressed as the rest of you are, so I apologize. I'm doing this to keep myself focused as well. Homemade turkey soup on the stove, comforting smells. For a lot of people, spice blends like holiday cookie spice, the stuff that you associate with apple pie or pumpkin pie or spice cookies, the cinnamon and the clove and the allspice. There's a lot of like cozy home family feels with those. And again, not necessarily like from a magical perspective, but from just a pure psychological perspective. By the way, the two are so close, they're intertwined. Magic and psychology, or anyway. But so something that reminds you of good, cozy, comfortable times, comforting things. Oh yeah, peppermint is great. I love every type of mint. Okay, I'm gonna finish my tea because there's don't know I'll finish it. But drink a little bit of tea. For me, honestly, both the ritual and also like the tactile thing, tea is a huge focus for me. Both making it, the heat of the mug, having a certain specific set, a couple of mugs, you'll see me with pretty much the same ones over and over again. The familiarity of it, the habit of it, the mouth feel, like all of the ways that it appeals to my senses, from scent to taste to touch, like all of that helps me. That helps me. Oh, see, Sherry is suggesting sage. A fun fact with like smoke cleansing, and we will what we've borrowed the word smudging for. Sage was not ever the only thing used, although that is certainly something that was used in the Americas. Sage and cedar, sweetgrass, there's a bunch of things that were used in the Americas. The idea of cleansing spaces with smoke is something that you find in multiple cultures. There were in European tradition things known as strewing herbs, that like meadowsweet, that were used for the scent that they released. They were, cut and then spread on the ground, and as you trod upon them, as you walked on them, they made the space smell better. Um, Different herbs can be bundled and smoked. Frankincense and myrrh, of course, from the ancient Mediterranean, have had a long-standing association with cleansing your space, clearing the air, being used both as a way of cleaning, protecting, and as a sacrament. Yeah, I do find our fur babies as really good grounding ways of taking care of ourselves. Uh, I saw someone who wanted to know how to deal with, okay, Nia, I need help in dealing with some mean neighbors who make fun of me because of my disabilities without harming them. Um, I got two possibilities with that. I mean, there's an old curse that I use, and I use air quotes for curse because it's not really a curse. It's more taking that frustration and anger and using it as the fuel for a may you get what you truly deserve. And leaving whatever that is open to the universe to judge. It's not mine to judge. It's just, you know what? I want you to get what you have earned from whatever you're doing, whatever that might be. And I find that a little bit therapeutic because it lets me just take the and throw it out, and then leaves the rest of it in the hands of powers wiser than myself. But I think in the case of your neighbors, more than that, I would get a mirror, um, especially this is assuming that you practice at least some sort of magic or you have like a little altar or something. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to be pagan or whatever. Like what it, this assumes a lot, but I would get a mirror or a small piece of mirror or even a reflective piece of glass, and I would spend a little time looking at that and thinking about them and thinking about what they see in me and thinking about what they see when they look in the mirror and wanting them, focusing on them first, seeing themselves in others. Because when you are so lacking in empathy that you will make fun of someone because they're different from you, it's because you're not outside of your own head. You're stuck in yourself. You don't have any kind of empathy. You aren't looking at other people as if they are people. You're only thinking of yourself as a person, and you're looking at other people as objects, as obstacles, as things to be exploited, taken advantage of, or removed from your presence. And what they need is to be able to see people as people, to see people with the same needs and value and rights as they perceive in themselves. So I would use a mirror and turn that mirror back on them. Uh, yeah, I can't put links in here because Facebook broke something when they did the new page thing, and the platform that I use for streaming, at least for now, means that every single time that I go over here and try to post something, it kicks me off of Facebook because Facebook gets confused. So I encourage everyone else, like if there's a question and you can post a link that would answer that question, please feel free to do so. Um, you know, if you know a favored shop for stuff, I know one of my favorite online shops. Well, actually, they're an in-person shop, but they've got fantastic stuff. Is Arts and Crafts, and it's spelled arts with an E, like ARTES. They're up in Michigan. The folks who run the Temple of Witchcraft have some fantastic stuff. So that's like Christopher Penzak and Steve Kenson and Adam Sartwell. Uh, I would also recommend, like, if sweetgrass and sage and cedar are things that you're looking for, since the practice of smudging and smoke cleansing, specifically with white sage and sweetgrass and those, is a First Nation, Native American tradition from multiple tribes. Look up those tribes. Many of them, all of them, honestly, are struggling due to COVID, are struggling more so than any other groups of people right now. Uh, buy directly from them. Because then you know that it has been harvested and prepared precisely for that purpose. It has been done so by people who understand. And that way you are also giving back to the people whose wisdom has given us this idea of cleansing with sage and sweetgrass and whatnot. Okay, so that's my thought. Uh, okay, when spirits are present, how often should I cleanse or sage my home? usually bless it once a month to rid spaces of all negativity. Yeah, once a month works for me. Like, unless things are like really like off the chain and suddenly something's not comfortable or the pets are reacting in a way that they seem uncomfortable, once a month it works, is usually what I recommend to people. If it seems like there's a lot going on, if you or someone who lives in the house has been going through like a really depressive episode, if there's been a lot of anger, a lot of emotion, that builds up, and that emotional buildup, that residual stuff starts to attract things. So like if there's or if somebody's physically sick and has been sick in the house for a while, go through, open the windows a little bit, and then, do a little bit more diligence with clearing stuff. But usually once a month is fine. I see some chatter about demons and daemons and all of that fun stuff. I might have a book on that just in case you're curious. And lots of fun stuff going on. Is there somebody just screaming demon? I mean, I just, you know what? Let them vent, ignore them, whatever. If somebody's screaming obscenities, I'll block them, but, whatever. Maybe they're just saying that I'm a demon. Or maybe they just love my t-shirt. Teresa, how worried should I be about objects being moved in my house? I would say, if you have a pet, and in the case I know you do, is the pet behaving in a way where the pet seems like they're worried about what's going on? And then how do you feel about this? Sometimes like before the activity or after the activity. If you don't feel comfortable in your house, if something's getting your hackles off, if your instincts tell you that this isn't okay, if animals especially are reacting in a way that suggests it's not okay, then I would be concerned. But if it's just shit's moving in the house, spirits try to communicate in a lot of different ways, and some of them are a little bit less effective than others. So they will act out by moving things, try to get your attention by moving things, sometimes turn the lights on and off, the usual sort of stuff. If it doesn't feel like there's something that you should be afraid of, if nothing else living in the house is having a reaction as if this is a threat, then consider that something's trying to communicate. And instead, just set some ground rules. Like, if it's bothering you that shit's moving around, talk to it and say, hey, this isn't cool, this isn't okay. Like, set some boundaries. Open up the opportunity for communication. And if you have some comfort zone issues with that, just be clear about like what would be the ideal way to communicate with you in a way that doesn't upset you, in a way that doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, and express that, communicate that, so that you allow for the option to communicate, because usually that's what they want. And if you just completely shut everything down, they're likely to act up more. And see what happens. Like really just try to set good boundaries, have some open communication, approach with a certain amount of compassion and kindness, unless you are definitely getting the heat, like the off of it, and you've got like other confirmation, especially with a pet, that the pet is also reacting. If it seems like it's bad stuff, if you know how to kick it out, kick it the fuck out. Button the place up pretty good, set up some really good boundaries and wards, and if it seems to come back, get increasingly aggressive and hardcore with it. Michelle, isn't your house haunted? Oh yes, both of my houses are haunted. So I have this place that we live in most time, and then there's Inspiration House, which is a haunted house in Oberlin, Ohio. It is a home that was built in 1869, and Inspiration House is haunted with mostly past residents. It's one of the honestly, it's one of the most physically active hauntings that I've encountered that is not negative. Typically, when you get a lot of very physical activity, a lot of like banging and like things like physically moving around, often for the kind of energy that's required with that, the kind of focus that's required with that, usually it's because there's a lot of negative emotion, there's either a lot of anger or a lot of fear or a lot of something. And that's not the case with the Inspiration House. I don't know if it's where the house is built, what it's built of, a combination of multiple things, but the spirits of Inspiration House are very physically active and just really nice. Like they're just, old folk that lived there for 20, 30 years, died in the house in most cases, almost always by natural causes. And they just kind of hang around because they like it. Like they're just not moving out. They're not stuck really. They're just living their best life, doing their thing. This house, so this house is maintained in part as sort of like the central meeting house of my magical group house Kepi. And so it has many, many bedrooms and many places for people to sleep because at least 8 times a year, as many members of House Kepi come over here, and we do our seasonal rituals like in Kepi, and we do a bunch of other stuff, and honestly hang out and socialize and whatnot. Our main space for doing ritual is, if you've seen pictures of what I call the library or the ritual chamber, it is this bookcase lined space that is wood and like low kind of warm lighting. And that is where we hold our rituals and also where people will come and do research, because I have a lot of books on mythology and folklore and the occult. And that space also has a couple of dedicated spirit doors, spaces that are specifically aimed at allowing some of the spirits that we work with and that we are related to have a corner of the house that is theirs. And they hang out there, and they sometimes come up to the upper levels. There's some rules about that. Most of them listen to those rules. A few of them, it takes a little convincing that those rules are there for everybody's protection, not just ours. And it's a very spiritually active house. There's a lot of stuff that goes on here. And they are not shy about making a ruckus if there's something that I really need to know about. That's a great question. So, Lisa Love Steele asks, do the ghosts see the houses as they are now or as they were when they were alive? My experience with that has been that they see kind of a combination. It's a little bit like a double exposure on film. What's more real, what has more weight, is the house as it has existed the longest and at the most significant times. So it's a combination of age, but also emotion and intent. There's something that like makes it more concrete when there's intense emotional moments that sort of bake in the memory of what that space looked like. We encounter that most commonly in hauntings with traumatic events, with negative events, but it's not only negativity that makes that happen. It's noteworthy when it's negative because it's really hard to ignore, because we are then experiencing echoes of that trauma. But in the case of Inspiration House, it's interesting because in the early 1900s, there's a couple of rooms that were added. And there's some spirits that really don't go there. They only walk through the part of the house that is familiar to them, and engage with the house as if it were still the house that they lived and died in. And so there's something of a kind of time loop without actual time travel for a lot of ghosts. They are very much about memory, about what was important to them at specific times. And they carry that with them and even help to anchor that in a space. It's really fascinating, especially if you have like the perceptions that I do. Because when I'm doing those walkthroughs, those blind walkthroughs, one of the reasons, and one of the many reasons I have the blindfold on, is so I'm not seeing the space as it looks now. Because what I am much more likely to perceive and engage in is that sort of spectral echo of how it exists in the spirit realm. Like, what is the ghost of the house, for lack of a better way of putting it? Like, how it was built up with emotion and energy, like what lingers despite what's changed, despite what's been built on top of it. It's really neat to dive into. Oh, okay. I'm gonna take. Let's see. Do you ever feel things from reading posts like this? I actually put a lot of work into not like reading people at a distance, especially not accidentally. Uh, Most of my training wasn't so much about opening my abilities as learning uh, when to consciously close them, so that I'm not just creeping on everybody's thoughts all the time. Let's see. Let's see. Supposed to. Okay, lots of stuff scrolling by very, very fast. Oh, the RV, a haunted RV. That I haven't heard of those often because they tend to be things that move around, and so a lot of people seem to think that a spirit, a human ghost particularly, will haunt a place that it died, and that they're stuck there, and they're only stuck there until they realize that they're not. Like the idea of being stuck is more because they've got a lot of associations with the place and a lot of investment in the place. But spirits, human spirits, any of them, are much more mobile than I think, you know, is presented to us in TV or movies or books. I love this haunted RV story, though. Thank you, Richard, for sharing. Chrissy Cooper asks a really good question. When a person passes away and their spirit does not cross over, would the spirit go to a place that they most loved or to the place that they passed at? And I say, generally, they're going to go to a place that they loved the most, a place that was most emotionally important to them. And there may be multiples of those. Somebody who's passed on may anchor to a living person rather than a place. We develop that sort of anecdotal idea that a ghost haunts where they died because of the extreme cases. And by those extreme cases, I mean like when there is a lot of abuse, when there's a murder, when there's an incredible amount of trauma, there's a lot of emotion baked into that. And for the person who went through that, there's a lot that's kind of pulls them there. And until they resolve the trauma and the hurt, if they are really like wound up with it, they will kind of be stuck there because that emotion is what they're working through. Simply put, they really need a good therapist, and there's not a whole lot of therapists to the dead, and it's understandable that they have basically PTSD and a lot of trauma based around this horrible thing that happened to them, and they're sort of stuck trying to like work through that on their own. And if you are someone who's been through trauma, been through a crisis, and didn't have at the time or over time the luxury of a good therapist or counselor who could relate to you or believe you or who you could trust, you know that it takes a lot longer to work through that and heal that. So for human ghosts who've gone through really hard things, you're going to find them frequently lingering around the places where the bad stuff happened because they're still working on contextualizing that, on healing that, on working their way through that. And the fact that they're doing that work means that they're going to kind of circle back around where it happened. That said, that is the exception, not the rule. A lot of spirits, human ghosts, do not have to be earthbound or stuck to be present here. They can have a choice. They can be here because they want to be here. They've got plenty of time to go do whatever they want to do, but they may still be very emotionally involved with what happened in their previous life, with people who were important to them, with places, with pets. And so some will just move on seamlessly because they're ready to go, and you know, it's great that this stuff is here, but they're much more interested in trying to see like what's over there. But others, they want to see that grandchild grow up. They want to make sure that somebody's taking care of their favorite spaniel. Like there's things that they get invested in. And it's not so much that they're earthbound, it's that they're doing their thing, they're working through stuff, and they have every right to. I'm not a fan or a proponent of crossing things over. I don't think that well, first of all, I really doubt our ability to do that. I think it's incredibly presumptuous to assume that I, a regular person who might not even know these spirits, can just open a door and kick them on into their next life. That assumes so much. And honestly, why not let them work through things themselves? Like I said, they need a good therapist. So if if I have a role, or you have a role as someone who can communicate with these, what the best application of that role would be is as a compassionate listener, a person to have a conversation, a person to hear what they're going through and to offer ideas and suggestions, but not declarations, not orders, um, to give them a choice and to help them figure out like what is the best choice for them. So that's my soapbox. Oh, do I know any tips that will help an extreme empath who works with the public? They wear protective charms, cleanse after work, but they still end up drained of their energies, and also tips on re-energizing. Oh goodness, there's a lot. Let me finish my tea here. And I can get caught in this answering questions. I do still need to like actually, package up the Kefi. So I'll answer this one and putter a little bit. Let you guys kind of hang out and chat. I'm very sad my tea is now cold. That's okay. It's still tea, so. All right. Somebody who works with the public who's an extreme empath. Uh, this is an analogy that wouldn't have worked until 2020. But if you think of shielding and protection like PPE, it really helps. So you've got two things to consider: your sensitivity level. So think of yourself like how vulnerable. Well, what part of the vulnerable population are you? Are you somebody who's not particularly vulnerable to the stuff that you're going to be exposed to, or are you somebody who really has to consider how easy it is for you to be overwhelmed by it? And then the next step is, with what you're going into, how much are you going to be exposed to? So what's your vulnerability level? What's the exposure level? And that will determine how much PPE you put on. And in terms of like psychic protection, think of shielding as, you've got one mask on, and that's your basic shielding of like, I've got a thing to protect me from the stuff that could come in and affect me. And then there are much more extreme situations where maybe you want a double mask, or make sure that you've got an N95. You put much more work into the shield. You make sure that it is less permeable. You make sure that there's a lot going on to keep you protected. But maybe it's even worse. You're going someplace where you're being ground down by this. There's just a lot of negativity. Say you are an oncology nurse, you work at a cancer ward, you are working with people who are like facing death and horrible decisions every day. So you want a face shield. Maybe you want like the full cover from head to toe in terms of PPE. So think of, you're not going to walk around like that shielding all the time, psychically shielding. Like if you're going to the grocery store, or if you're going to visit your friend's house and you know that they've been socially distancing and taking care, it's not like you're going to face shield and glove your entire body up. So for your friend, T. Thorne Coyle, who is a pagan author, had a really interesting approach to shielding that was a little bit different. They did this sort of like close to the skin, almost like a psychic body condom. They framed it a little bit more like a snake shedding its skin. So when they had to go do a convention or they were going out in the public, they would put this very thin layer of energy around them that was very, very close, like hugged underneath the aura. And it allowed them to interact with things, but when they were done, they would then peel the whole thing off so that anything that stuck to them, anything that they came into contact with, stuck to this instead. And they could just shed that like a skin and dispose of it, and then not be touched significantly by what they had been interacting with. And I think that that's one useful thing to consider. The other thing is just making really conscious transitions from places that are overwhelming to you and situations that are overwhelming to you and places that are safe and healing. Uh, for folks who are still driving to places of employment, consider your car as kind of the airlock from this dangerous space, or at least a space with a lot of stuff that you're exposed to a space that you don't want to bring that home to. So use the opportunity of the drive, the commute, use the enclosed space of your vehicle as the place where you consciously let stuff go, clear stuff out, listen to loud music. It helps to do physical things. So physically changing your clothes, physically changing your jewelry from one place to the other, like making a significant change with how you look can affect how you feel. Um, in worst case scenarios, take the clothing that you wear in the bad place and keep it in the car, and make sure that you've got something else to change into when you go home so that you are literally not bringing anything that you associate with that space. And it's not just like good hygiene stuff these days. It's about psychological cues too. uh, Looking at Lisa, the day my mom died, we had not spoken for about 5.5 years prior to her death. um, Nobody in my sorry ass family uh, let me know that she was sick, let alone on her deathbed. And around 5:30 a.m., I got jerked out of bed. My grandpa called me at 6:30 a.m. and said, "Your mother died." I asked what time, and he said around 5:30. We both fully believed that it was her. So, Lisa, what you are describing is a classic, incredibly well documented experience called a deathbed visitation. There are thousands of these reports in the annals of the Society for Psychical Research and the American Society for Psychical Research. There are reports that go back to the 1700s and well before that. And there's something about we're all connected. Like, we communicate with one another in ways that we're not usually conscious of, and the physical world is very distracting, so we don't always notice. But they're easier to notice when we're asleep, in those quiet hours, when our mind has shifted gears from this sort of like regular day consciousness to dreaming consciousness. There's all sorts of reasons for that, and a lot of psychological mumbo jumbo I could get into. But the important thing is we are more open and more receptive. The world is quieter, and we also notice. And when we wake up, we can tell something happened, something just happened. And sometimes we may feel their presence, sometimes we may have heard their voice, we may have seen them as a full apparition, we may have only dreamed about them. But all of it, however it manifests, is striking enough that consistently in a deathbed visitation, the person who's experienced the contact notes the time. And they don't at that time know that the person was dying or had died. Consistently, they are able to confirm after the fact. A family member or a friend reaches out and contacts them the next day or a week later to say, this person passed on, and you find out it's the time that you felt them reach out. And so, yeah, I absolutely believe that what happened to you was real. That was contact. And you are totally not alone with that. It's one of the most documented paranormal experiences. Uh, and, actually kind of a comforting one. We're all connected. In those last moments, and this is really important right now, I think, in those last moments, even though we may be physically isolated, we are never alone. We are only a thought away. There's a lot of power in that. I'm going to take a minute and put some stuff in the Kefi tins. Once again, for those of you who are coming to the stream and, like me, escaping the chaos that is the news in the United States right now, because I just want to see more bloody people getting dragged out of the Capitol, I am packaging up the newest batch of Kefi, an ancient temple incense called Phoenix, which was started. It is both incense and a magical act, my way of spell making. And this Phoenix is intended to harness the energies of rising from the ashes, rebirth, and renewal after a difficult, trying time. I started it at the end of October with the intent of finishing it up in January, in order to bring that energy into 2021 and try to bring us out of the utter hell that was 2020. And so that is what I'm doing. And in between that, I answer questions when I see them. I chat about stuff, and occasionally I do a little song and dance. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. This is the boring part of the stream as I fill some of these up, because since I've been streaming, you cleaned me out of the 20 that we put up to begin with, so I need to make sure we have more. Okay, and I have these lovely little stickers with a logo made by Kat Rogers. Lovely artist. She does energy body artwork for folks. So she reads your energy body and then gives you a piece of art that she produces while she's doing it. She is one of my many students, of whom I am quite proud. So somebody whose skills I can endorse because I helped to guide her through developing them. And if you are going like, you teach people, holy shit, how do I get in on that? I have a Patreon, and on my Patreon, that's mainly like where I teach. I do a lot of online classes and stuff. You can find classes on my website. Things are pre-recorded, everything from healing with energy to psychic self-defense to field guides to spirits, pretty much everything that falls in my wheelhouse. And you can buy individual classes, or you can hop on the Patreon and not only get access to the classes as they happen, and get first access to things, as well as get to tell me like, hey, I'd really like you to write a book on this. But you also get access to what I consider a really, really wonderful, supportive community of folks. And you can hang out with the other people who are learning together with and from one another. Like I said, a lovely crew of people, all of whom make it possible for me to buy and source the fairly rare and frankly expensive ingredients for Kefi, and do things like this and give me the freedom to just kind of go where my spirit takes me. Because contrary to popular belief, writing books does not pay the bills. Embarrassingly so, actually. Yeah, I love Avery's work. What are the best crystals and herbs to use during times of rebirth? Again, I'm not going to pretend that I know much about crystals and things. They don't speak to me very well. That's just, different results, different people. So if anybody on the stream is big into crystals, happily speak up, say what your favorite things are. Herbs for rebirth, but I think some of that depends on what your influences are. I heard the myth of the phoenix pretty early on as a kiddo, so cinnamon has been something associated with death and rebirth and renewal since I was, knee high to a jackalope. This one's got nothing in it. But some of it, okay, well, I guess that gets into, I think a lot of symbols, including stones and crystals, herbs and whatnot, although plants do definitely have some specific, uh, like measurable medicinal qualities. Some of the magical associations are more cultural. They're more about stories and myths and folklore that have grown up around those herbs. And those things are very temporal and regional. So certain plants are going to have significance to one group of people and maybe a very different significance to another group of people, which ultimately means what speaks to you? Like what does it mean to you? Does something have a strong association for you with healing, with rebirth? A little bit like, reading tarot. There's a technique for teaching tarot where you have the student not look at any of the books, don't look at any of the meanings of the cards, but instead just spend some time with the cards and looking at the pictures and developing their own associations, basically asking themselves, what does this picture say? What do these symbols mean to me? Some people object to that approach. I think that there's some value in it, though, because when we're talking about symbols, when we're working with symbols, there's sort of a dialogue. And that is a dialogue that is carried across time and location, because there's what that symbol means to the person who's viewing it. And there's what it has always meant, what it has meant to multiple people, like cultures and things. Like, what history has it carried forth? And then how is it perceived through the lens of the present and of the individual? And all of those things, both the history and the current perception, go into how you or I now engage with that symbol. Oh, Alfred's got a fun way of reading the cards. That's cool. So I will tell you that the absolute coolest way I have ever seen someone read tarot was actually at a LARP, a role-playing live-action game, where this person, Deirdre, had a deck of cards, 78 cards, because it was a tarot deck. It was completely blank. There were no pictures on any of these cards. Nothing was marked. Nothing was anything. She played a type of character who was like a seer, who would just sort of like see stuff and pull visions out of the air. And she used these as simultaneously part of the character and the play, but they were also things that she worked with outside of it. She would do an honest to goodness, like Celtic Cross, traditional tarot reading with this blank deck. There's no pictures anywhere. And she would just make up whatever card it was. And she was so good at it, she remembered every single card that she pulled. So she could refer back to, like, strength over here and the 5 of swords over here, and like just the whole thing. It was, tarot is an interesting thing because there's the pictures on the cards, but the real meaning, I mean, there's definitely meaning for each of those pictures, but it's a dialogue with the person doing the reading. Like, there's a way that you'll hear people say that tarot speaks to them. There's an experience that they have with that. And Deidre's blank deck really highlighted that that tarot is more, it's a mirror, it's a tool, it's a way of kind of getting out of your own way to allow where the real magic is, which is you, to come out, to be projected. For a lot of people who don't think of themselves as psychic, or who feel like they've got a lot of hangups, or they've blocked stuff out, using a tool like tarot or the runes or a scrying mirror or a pendulum helps them sort of like leap across any of the hesitancy, lack of confidence, the sense of barriers that they've built up, and just lets them project it onto this other thing. It lets them get outside of themselves and really tune into what their abilities are. It's a very, very useful tool. You cannot hear it, but there is an incredibly upset cat on the other side of the door, just behind this iPad that I'm talking to, because the door is closed, because there is Kefi in this room, and I'm pretty sure none of you want cat hair in your Kefi. And if there are cats in the room, there will be cat hair, just sort of free floating. I also want to acknowledge to people, since somebody had asked, like, how do I let the anger go and the sadness and the frustration? It's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be sad, and it's okay to be frustrated. And I think there's value in experiencing and acknowledging those feelings. And I do think that there's a point where they become more destructive than they are constructive if all we do is sit and experience them, if there's no outlet. But we can't find a direction for them or a constructive way to direct them if we don't acknowledge them. And that acknowledgement means sitting with them for a little while, like understanding, like, really, why do I feel this way? I think you need to know the why before you can figure out, like, what do I do with it? So don't be upset with yourself for being upset, please. Don't feel shame because you're angry. Don't feel shame because you're sad. It is very, very normal, especially what we've all collectively been through. 2020 was not the kind of year any of us were raised to be prepared to live through. With that, understand that there's going to be days where you are overwhelmed, where you feel some things very deeply, and where you feel ill-equipped to do anything other than feel that day. And yes, we absolutely, we've got responsibilities. Some of us are parents, some of us run companies, some of us are writers, like, we have to get back on the horse and do things. But consider we live in a culture where, like, everything's transactional. We have no value unless we're working. And that's a little toxic. Give yourself a little time and give yourself a little space. And if you have even a little luxury, monetarily or time-wise, give yourself a day every couple of weeks to just be kind to yourself, to just accept, no, I'm not getting much of anything useful done today because the world's on fire. I don't even know what to do with it. I'm just going to sit with how I feel and try to work through that and try to acknowledge that and try to see, is there something constructive I can take out of what I'm feeling, or do I just have to find a way to move with it? Because sometimes it's not a matter of moving past it. It's like any pain, it's like any wound. It doesn't necessarily heal quickly, and sometimes you have to learn, how must I now move differently because of the thing that is happening to me, because of the thing that has happened to me, because of the scars that I carry. It's not just going to go away. You figure out what your new normal is. Anyway, so that's very, very deep. Let's move to, can I read pets? Can I hear their thoughts? Yes. Yes and yes. To the point where the neighbors have gotten a little suspicious about how much their pets take to me. I find animals much less complicated than people, and kind of consequently easier to read. I mean, they don't lie to themselves, and all of us do. Like our big brains are our biggest fucking problems. We really get in our own ways, but they don't really lie to themselves, and that means that it's much easier to, like, really hear them, like, figure out, like, what they feel, what they want. certainly the animals that are that have been raised around humanity for generations and generations, companion animals, because they've kind of come to be in lockstep with us. Like there's parts of their brains and the way in which they think and interact that have come to be in tune with us, so it's easier to relate to them. Um, I my mom used to live in North Texas. She's passed on since, and she decided she was going to have her little artist retreat um, in what we will politely refer to as buttfuck East Bugaha, because I mean it was like way the fuck, like it was 100 miles north of Texas, and then it was like 6 miles down the country road, and then it was like 3 miles down this dirt road, and then it was down the path that her truck had made in the dirt. Like it was way as far away. She was an empath. She never learned how to shield. Her answer was to live as far away from people as she possibly could get. With my stepdad, and at some point they got a wild hair up their ass, and they had 2 cows. And so they had 2 horses, they had 2 cows, and I'm down there. And horses I was used to, like there's some mind speak that can happen. Like I can communicate with a horse. The cows, no, really not so much. Like they were just cows. Felt like a big, slow brick wall. I have better luck communicating with a tree, as much as I feel very weird talking to a tree. Uh, but anyway, so that's my. Oh, I have a thing that I have to do. And hopefully, since that was copyrighted music, we didn't just get shut off of YouTube. So, I have 10 minutes to go do something completely different that I have committed to. So I wanted to give everybody a little bit more respite from the news. But I've got stuff, and I'm not quite done here. Yep, Labyrinth. Well, I'm a geek of a certain age. Anyway, so the fun thing is I'm running D&D for a group of people who've never really played it before. There's one or two who have played, and tonight is just like the brief introduction to the world and the characters that they might be interacting with. So, good night, and hang in there, guys.